Hi everybody, it's Cor from CorAstrology, and today I'm going to chat with you about the coronavirus. What caused it? How did it start? How long will it be around for? All very big questions in these very unprecedented times. So let me remind you of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction I discussed in January, which happened on the 12th of January 2020, where I'd mentioned this is a time of a massive turning point for each individual on this planet. Unknown to me that the day before, or I think 2 or 3 days, I think it was the 9th or the 11th of January, the first person had passed away from the COVID-19 virus. So I'd like to just remind you of the influence of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction on us here on Earth currently. So Pluto is the planet of trauma and crisis and rebirth. It is the planet that makes us look at our shadows and our unconscious ways of living that we are not consciously aware of. It is all about power, oppression, and it also is about transformation and rebirth and resurrection. In other words, something needs to die and come to an end. A door needs to be closed before a new door can open. So this allows us for the opportunity to understand that a certain unconscious way of living has revealed toxins. Pluto is also about toxins. If you took all toxic thoughts, paranoias, obsessions, fears, blockages, all of that, and put it into one pill, and you would call that, this is my pill of paranoia, fear, toxin. This is my pill of unconsciousness, where I do things unconsciously that I don't realize are harmful to my environment, for instance. So this planet Pluto joined up with the planet Saturn in January the 12th, 2020. Saturn is the planet of structure, limitations, boundaries. It is where we feel restricted. And it is also the planet of order as well as physical manifestation. To physically manifest a house, foundations need to be built. To physically manifest roads, communities, cities, the physical manifestation of that needs order and limitations. We need signed off plans from an architect before we build a house to make sure that once we build it, it'll be stable and long-lasting. Saturn is the planet about long-lasting stability. And when Pluto and Saturn join up, Pluto is saying that the current structures are now outdated and need an overhaul. It's nothing majorly scary. It is scary for people who don't like change and who want to resist it or are in denial about it. But ultimately, Pluto is saying we as human beings are evolving, and to evolve, we got to kind of stay with the program, and we got to change structures that no longer work. So these two planets are together in the sky, came together at the exact same degree in January. In the sign of Capricorn. Capricorn is one of the most ambitious signs of all of the 12 signs. It's an earth sign, so it masters the earthly manifestation, and it is very ambitious. It is the little mountain goat that wants to climb right up to the top of the mountain. So it doesn't give up, and it has patience. It knows it needs some time to get to the top. However, that is the ultimate ambition, is to get to the top of that mountain. So the word success is synonymous with the sign of Capricorn. Being an authority is synonymous with the sign of Capricorn. Being disciplined, responsible, hardworking, committed, being like the wise old man. Saturn is like the wise old man who's saying, no, 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 no. These are the rules and regulations. This is how you need to do it. If you want to build something that's going to last and do it properly, and you want to succeed in this, this is the business cycle. This is how it needs to work. So when Pluto meets up with Saturn in the sign of Capricorn, it's saying all of these structures need an overhaul. There's something in the unconsciousness of humanity in terms of this physical manifestation, this overemphasis almost on the fact that we are physical beings having a spiritual experience. That would be Saturn in Capricorn saying, no, but you're physical. Never mind the spiritual. You're a physical being. We've got to master the physical. And when Pluto comes along and wants these physical manifestations changed, it generally creates circumstances that force us into it, because nobody wants to just change for change's sakes. We generally change when we're under a lot of stress and a lot of pressure. Pluto is about pressure, and it's pressure that is so insurmountable that we feel like we want to escape and say, no, this can't be happening. I don't want to. And it's just pushes and pushes. And with Pluto being the most outer of the planetary things, I don't know if they call it a dwarf planet or a big planet, whatever it is, it's the furthest one out in our solar system. It takes 248 years to travel around the sun. And because it takes so long to travel, when Pluto is around and connecting with another planet, the changes happen over a longer period. And this is of benefit to us, because if this only happened for a very short time, then nobody would really change, because we wouldn't be put under such pressure. But Pluto really pressurizes us and says there's too many toxins. There's this unconscious dirt that's coming up that's not serving the structures that are currently running this world. And Capricorn wanting to be the leader refers to governments, to anybody who's a leader of a country, a leader of an organization, a leader of a household, a leader of a school, a leader of a local community. Anybody who's in a leadership situation is going to be confronted with having to overhaul this entirely. The Pluto's coming for this overhauling and rebirthing whatever structures in your life that you're managing. So how come this has been exacerbated even further is that the planet Jupiter, which is generally the planet of luck and good fortune, it's known as the greater benefic, and it is about wealth and pennies from heaven and blessings and all the good things that you could dream of in your life, when it is in a sign that it likes, when it's in rulership, like it was all of last year in Sagittarius. It brought many good things to many people, all of us on this planet. And when it moved into Capricorn in December, it went into the sign of its fall. It doesn't like it. Jupiter is about being philosophical, noble, spiritual, gainful, and expansive. And the sign Capricorn is about the opposite. It's about physical manifestation. Jupiter is about spiritual reality, saying, but we are spiritual beings having a material experience. While Capricorn will say, no, we are a material being having a spiritual experience. So when Jupiter, the planet of spiritual expansion and seeing the bigger picture, joins up into the sign of Capricorn, which is all about feeling and touching and the manifesting the structures in our lives, it is not happy. And generally what it tends to do when Jupiter comes into the sign of Capricorn is that it behaves in ways that are not of its nature. So what happens when there's too much of a good thing, right? We become wasteful. We become excessive. We become greedy. We become unrealistic. We become grandiose. So with Jupiter also in Capricorn, and it's now joining up with Saturn and Pluto, it's in this whole mix up in the heavens. We've got Pluto saying, overhaul all the structures in your life. And we've got Jupiter coming and saying, everything that's been greedy, wasteful, unrealistic, excessive in your life is now thrown back at us. All right. So back to, we've got Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter all in the sign of Capricorn, showing all these things that are going on in our lives. Now throwing into the mix also, we have the South Node that's been there for most of last year, already giving us the indications of which areas in our lives we need to let go of and make changes. We've had fair warning. And now currently, actually today on the 22nd of March, as I'm filming this, we have Mars, which is joining up with Pluto. Pluto, the planet of transformation. Mars, the planet of war, the planet of action, the planet of any sharp object like a knife. a spear, the planet of inflammation. Mars rules the blood and inflammation. And it is joining up with Pluto just today as we speak, saying there are urgent matters to be attended, whereby we need to detoxify and look at the things that are toxic in our world and take action towards that. So I'm imagining there's going to be more extreme calling for closing restaurants and closing whatever it takes to help stop the spread of this illness. There might be energies flaring up today in arguments with Mars and Pluto being together in Capricorn. Mars is our daily drive and our daily need for survival, i.e. we wake up in the morning saying, what do I need today to survive? And today Mars is sitting with Pluto saying, to survive, you need to change things. You need to let go of old ways and make big changes and detoxify. And Mars then continues, and on the 31st of this month of March, it joins up with Saturn, which has moved into the next sign of Aquarius. And as it moves away from Saturn, I'd say by the first week in April, things might lighten up a little bit. We still have Mercury in Pisces up until, I think, the second week, until the 12th of April. And Mercury being the planet of communication, moving around, thinking, talking, when it's in the sign of Pisces, it's a little bit dreamy. Pisces is a sign of no boundaries, and it is very susceptible to things such as viruses. So there could still be a little bit unclarity about things, and I feel that at least until the 12th of April, the numbers will still be climbing. There'll still be more opportunity for the virus to spread around until we have maybe more of a lockdown going on. And adding to this, so I spoke about the south node of loss, I spoke about Saturn and Pluto and Jupiter, about excess, and now Mars, the planet of drive, all sitting together in Capricorn, saying governments, leaders, people in their own individual life. If you look at yourself as the leader of your own life, if you're the government of your own physical body, how are you managing that? Are you taking your vitamin C's and D's and your seleniums and your magnesiums and your zincs? And are you sleeping well? Are you looking after your health? If you're a smoker, perhaps this is the best opportunity for you to stop, because we know this virus hits the respiratory area. So you can kind of master your own life. If you feel like the life around you is going a bit out of control, try and keep the focus internally to see how you can actually make these changes in your own life. So I wanted to add to this one more cycle, and that being Jupiter, which I'd mentioned was coming into the mix of the Saturn, Pluto, and Mars. So Jupiter and Pluto 3 times this year connect at the same point. Just as Saturn and Pluto connected in January, Jupiter and Pluto connect on the 5th of April, the 30th of June, and again on the 12th of November this year. Now Jupiter, which also rules finances and money, and is the planet that I've referred to in terms of the excess and the wastefulness and the greed, when it meets Pluto, the planet of rebirth and change and endings and death and trauma, will for this entire year be playing out cycles regarding our own finances. Where are we excessive, greedy, wasteful, unrealistic, or grandiose in our finances? And on the 5th of April and on the 30th of June and the 12th of November, the better part of this year, we're going to keep on being reminded of where we have been using our funds incorrectly. And so too will the governments. So I feel that as long as this Jupiter-Pluto cycle continues for the rest of this year, that the virus will maybe become less and then more again as it flares up when these two planets meet up. Saturn, the planet that is very big part in this conjunction that happened in January, has actually moved into Aquarius now towards the end of March. And Aquarius is an air sign. So it is not so much worried about the physical manifestation of things. It's more about the ideology of humanity. Aquarius is the sign of humanity, and it's a very ideological sign. So we'll find that through March, from the 22nd of March today, and May, and even June, until the beginning of July, Aquarius is in this air sign, and it'll give us a bit of a breather to say, idealistically, in terms of saving humanity, how can we restructure things? And then from July, the beginning of July, all the way to December, Saturn goes back into the practical sign of Capricorn, where it says we're going to have to relook at the practicalities of our life and how we can reorganize and restructure them for the better of ourselves and humanity, before it moves forward again into Aquarius in December, on the 18th of December. So it's the better part of this entire year that coronavirus is going to be the feature, and how we're all going to restructure our lives and look at what it is that we need to let go of in our habits and ways to protect ourselves and to protect the entire world. This is truly a time for the entire world to take a big deep breath and say, what's all this rushing about being? The greed. Do we need 5G? 3G worked fine. I believe the 5G industry is something like a $17 trillion industry. Is it greed and money again that the rulers of our world, of every nation, are focusing on? Are they focusing too much on the material profits that they can make? Have they not realized we're actually spiritual beings having a material experience, and that we need to respect nature and God, our gods, whatever God you believe in, and the spiritual aspect of life? Or are they going to carry on with their greed? Some people say that the 5G started off the coronavirus in Wuhan because of the electromagnetic fields that it sends out. It's 100 times stronger than a 4G. That is greed, unrealistic, excessive. We don't need that. Why are we allowing our governments to implement these things that we don't want in our lives, which we know are harmful? For instance, is one way of looking at it. So these are things that are going to be debated in time to come to see what the way forward is. For me, what I would like to just mention to you also is that I looked at the cycles of illnesses and pandemics in the history of mankind to see if there was any similarity. And it was to my surprise, I suppose I shouldn't be surprised as an astrologer, but generally I do more personal astrology. And this is more of mundane astrology, worldly astrology, so something I've never really delved in, but I did enjoy it. And I can tell you this, that the smallpox virus has been around for over 10,000 years. About 3,000 odd years ago, it surfaced in Egypt and in India. And we know that there was an epidemic or a pandemic in the year 1157 before Christ, when Pharaoh Ramses V passed away of smallpox. They saw all the marks on his body in his mummy, and they know exactly what year this was. So 1157 before Christ, we had a Saturn and Pluto conjunction in Aquarius. Further to that, the bubonic plague, which was 1347 to 1353, was at a time where Pluto and Saturn were together in the heavens in the sign of Aries. I had mentioned in my Saturn-Pluto conjunction YouTube that I posted on the 12th of January, the cycle. So every 33 to 38 years, these two titans meet up in the heavens, right? So this happened about 38 years ago in 1981, for instance, and this is when the HIV/AIDS pandemic broke out. 36 million people were infected with HIV/AIDS, of which approximately 2 million passed away per year. It's down to about 1.6 now. This is not the first time we've had a Saturn-Pluto conjunction. This is not the first time some sort of pandemic has broken out. And every time humanity has had to adjust and make changes, which they did successfully, which is why we're still here on the planet. So again, we are asked to make these changes. The bubonic plague, by the way, they say killed between 75 to 200 million people and kind of wiped out half of Europe. And it took over 200 years for that to be reestablished. The coronavirus is not, thankfully, as hectic as those viruses, and in those days we didn't have the medication for it, and I'm pretty sure in the next year or so there'll be a vaccine for it, and if people build up their immunity and do the social distancing, it won't spread so much, and we can keep the curve down, and eventually everybody will have it, and as per the herd mentality, the immunity will build up in our society, and it will probably list as one of the other flus that are out there. Incidentally, during 2009 and 2010, when we had the swine flu, Pluto and Saturn were at square again to each other. During the 2001 and 2003 SARS breakout, Pluto was in Sagittarius in opposition to Saturn in Gemini. The Asian flu, which killed 2 million people during the years 1956 and 1958, again was Saturn in Scorpio squaring Pluto in Leo. So this isn't something new for us, and it will not be the last of it either. In 38 years or so, there will be another huge event happening. So every time Saturn and Pluto join, if it's not a pandemic, it might be a war that breaks out. World War I had broken out on a Saturn-Pluto conjunction in 1914. Saturn and Pluto were together in Cancer. World War II broke out when Saturn and Pluto were at square to each other in 1939. Robert Zola had predicted in this book by Benson Bobrick called The Fated Sky about the 9/11 attack, which was a Saturn-Pluto opposition in the heavens. So this is what happens when these massive planets with their magnetic energy swirl around us and create this kind of influence on us. And if we can just welcome it and try and see the good in it and move forward, it'll be so much easier for us to accept than try to pretend this is just going to be over in a month or a week or two. This is definitely going to be sticking with us for the rest of the year. The wise man Heraclitus, 535 years before Christ, had said there's one constant, and that is change. So part of being human, part of being part of nature is just that, this constant change. And I think nature is very thankful to us slowing down, just with having fresh air again, us not pouring this. We daily pour pollutants into our environment, and I think 65% or so of our body is actually made up of oxygen, and we breathe in this toxin thinking it's totally fine, and this virus is actually helping us to stop and slow down and say it's not fine throwing pollutants into the environment every day and making ourselves sick. So this is really a great time to sit down and reflect. There's a beautiful poem that's going around which seems to have been written by an Italian lady called Irene Villa, and then either translated by Kitty O'Meara or used as an inspiration to write the following words that I'd like to share with you. It says, "And the people stayed at home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows." And if I think of shadows, I immediately think of the planet Pluto. We are all meeting our shadow, this deep fear that people might have, or panic or paranoia. That is us looking at our own fears and shadows. And the people began to think differently. How can we transform these shadows? And the people healed. Once you even just acknowledge you have a shadow, and you then look at it and accept it and then change your lifestyle around it, you are healed. And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal. And when the danger passed and people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed. So I hope this may be an inspiration for you on this very big step that we humanity are taking. We can all start by individually making those changes, and that in itself will help us feel a lot more empowered to deal with the circumstances. I wish you all great health, great caution to move with these times. I thank you for your time for watching. If you like my YouTubes, please push the like button and subscribe. Be blessed. Take care. Lots and lots of love. Bye.